Rachel,
And I'm Amanda.
and this is episode 2 of our new podcast, Books and Bingos. This week, we're recommending books with a focus on the infamous maiden voyage of the Titanic in honor of Titanic Remembrance Day coming up on April 15th. Amanda, I realized when we were filming last week that I don't think we talked about any of our favorite genres, so I wanted to put that in there. I know we're both middle school librarians, but we both read very widely. So, what are your go-to
Fiction
genres?
is not a go-to genre for me. I do read it just because I know like I need to as for our jobs to make sure that we, what books we're getting and what books kids are interested in. But for me, I am a mystery thriller in all ages, as well as a romance girly. So those are my top two. But I read contemporary and poetry and all the things. But yeah, those are the top two. What about you?
I'll try about anything that isn't going to make me cry. I'm very adamant about that. So, the historical fiction's not really my jam either because those typically do make you cry. Um,
Mhm.
so I don't know. I stay away from those. I do like the mysteries. As you know, I'm a big fan of the cozies now because they're a lot of fun. And I'm
Yeah.
kind of breaking into the romance a little bit more. I think I used to read it a lot more than I do now, but it's kind of coming back for me. So,
Hey, it comes but comes in waves for me too. Sometimes I need that palate cleanser in between a murder book. I need
yes.
something sweet after.
Yes, well, these aren't going to be sweet today because they're all about the Titanic, which is definitely going to be sad. So, Amanda, what is your first pick for Titanic recommendations?
So my first one is Iceberg by Jennifer A. Nielsen. She has quickly risen in the ranks as one of our top middle grade historical fiction books in libraries, at least like I know in elementary and
Right.
middle. Alan Gratz is like the king, right? I'm finding that she's very much, riding right behind him because a lot of her books that have come out, and it's about lots of different time periods. It's not like she's just stuck in like World War II or something. She likes to kind of space it out between the different decades. And so I have read several of her other books, but I had yet to read Iceberg. And I remember showing the Scholastic Book Fair video when this one was on there, and I was like, that looks so good because like they did a big lead in into how she has all these hopes and dreams, but then she gets on the Titanic and we all know what's going to happen. So I just was very intrigued by that, but hadn't had an excuse or gotten around to reading it yet. I will say this is definitely one that has very strong characterization. So if you are teaching that in the classroom or you're trying to focus on that, the main character is very such much a strong character, and she's female and she's youngish, like tween age, and she just is trying to build a better life for herself when she gets on the Titanic to go to America. Her little brothers and her mom are struggling financially since the death of her father, and so she really wants to be able to provide for them. And so she has to sneak on the ship. So it deals with a lot of classism and misogyny because her being a female and in the working class, it really hit those two pretty hard, which I feel like are going to be great discussions in the classroom or in the library. This one would work in the middle grade square on the bingo, historical fiction, or even I could say you could stretch it to mystery because there is a little bit of a mystery going on the ship between some of the rich class in the upper decks are stealing from someone else. So she tries to figure it out because she wants to be a writer. So she kind of takes it on to be like a journalist in the story, which I really love too. Some content warnings are going to be death, theft, drowning, classism, poverty, and misogyny. So, highly recommend it, especially if you like historical fiction.
Yeah, I was really excited to see that she was coming out with a Titanic pick because she is very popular and the kids are always ready for a new Titanic book. So I had a feeling this one will be very popular at school, and it is.
Yeah, it flies off the shelf.
It
And I can see
does.
why.
My first pick is The Watch That Ends the Night by Alan Wolfe. This is a very strange type of book, I feel like. It's very unique. It's multi POV at all the different aspects of people and things, on the ship. The probably most unexpected POV was, I believe it was a kitchen rat, but you actually get a couple of pages from the point of view of a rat on the Titanic, which who would have thought of that? You know, that's
Right?
so interesting. The darkest one was the recovery crew coming in afterwards, retrieving people who did not survive. And that was definitely the darkest one. So that goes with all the trigger warnings of general Titanic and body recovery, of course. This is kind of like a mix between verse and like vignettes. It wasn't quite either one, I feel like, but all the pages were very short, so it kept me reading. And because it kept switching point of view, I was always interested to see who we were going to be with next. And you get a lot of the typical point of views, but it was really a unique Titanic experience for me. So I was really excited about that. And this would work for historical fiction, young adult, and maybe even verse if you wanted to go that way. For the nonfiction, that would work as well.
I'm adding it right now to my fall order because um I think that sounds so unique, like so different from what we normally think of. We think of like these big tomes, right? When we're talking about historical fiction or like talking about, this time period, there's usually a lot of facts and figures. So to have it in like vignette form, that's
Mhm.
really interesting. So I'm definitely adding that to my list. It's young adult, right?
Yes,
Awesome. Awesome.
very fun
Yeah,
for
I'm
Titanic books.
I was gonna say a rat point of view. Yeah, probably wanna read that one. So my second pick is History Smashers Titanic by Kate Messner. If you have not read the History Smashers book, I'm gonna do all the glowing things about it because Kate Messner is just a gift to the author community and educator community because she's always trying to, when she writes herself for her books, her fiction, she always likes to tackle different topics, which I really enjoy reading those. But then she started this series, which is for our middle grade readers, which tells the true story of history, which we don't always get to see reflected on our shelves. And I love that because it's giving kids the true factual events of what happened without being glossed over the parts that we think they can't handle, when we're dealing with racism or we're dealing with, how our nation was founded and all those types of things that we want to paint this picture of the pilgrims sitting down with the Native Americans and just having a great old dinner when really, it was very far, far from that. So I highly recommend this whole series, but the Titanic one in particular, I felt was great for our, like when I say middle grade, we're talking mostly third through seventh graders. But it has, the reason I say that age group is because it has a lot of illustrations and comic panels, which work really great for our kids that are moving from picture books into novels. And that's why I always recommending graphic novels because it's such a great transition between those two. And this works really well for that. In my library, I have it in my nonfiction section, obviously, but when kids are going through that, it just grabs their attention. The cover is like a cartoon illustrated that's going to catch their attention, and it looks like a novel because the thickness of it, but it is very easy to read for those kids. And it really went into the mechanics involved of how the Titanic was built and the issues that it had before it even hit the iceberg, which also is covered in the Iceberg book I read, by Nielsen, because there was a lot of that doesn't always get described in the books, right? They always talk about the iceberg part instead of all the things leading up to what could have been prevented, and not going at all by fixing some of these things before they went out on the water. So for this one, it's a nonfiction pick. It's also middle grade for the bingo. There is obviously mentions of death, but it is age appropriate. And then there's some sexism and classism in this one as well.
I'm so interested in these, and she just is popping them out like fire. I've been wanting to get one and read it. We have a few in our library already for like the middle grade readers, and I haven't got my hands on one yet. But I know we have like the Titanic, and I think you mentioned the Mayflower. She has one on like women's rights.
Yes.
So I'm super excited to get into one of these for sure. And my last pick is The Titanic, an interactive history adventure by Bob Temple. This was one I actually read with my students for a Titanic Remembrance Day library activity. It's very much like one of those choose your own adventure type. And it's kind of, I don't know, part of me thinks that that's really, weird for such tragic events, but they have them with wars too. And the kids love it because they can really build their empathy, putting themselves on the ship, experiencing what these people experience. And you get a lot of the typical perspectives from this. You get, different classes and different types of people that you get to experience their Titanic voyage with them. And it's really interesting to see if you can survive based on where you were. And even my kids, I think they were, I can't remember if we did it with fourth grade or fifth grade. They were even picking up on the fact that depending on where you were able to be on the ship really changed your ability to make it to a lifeboat. And then we were talking about, well, who had the first access? So, I mean, we were even getting into a lot of that classism, even then, before they could even put words to it. So I thought this was a very interesting thing to use with the kids. And it's just interesting yourself to see maybe some of the choices that they might have had once they were in danger and had hit that iceberg. Again, general Titanic warnings, but nothing really stood out. The only thing I always advise is, because this is a choose your own adventure, if you choose the quote unquote wrong path, you will not survive. So that may be triggering for some kids, but that's typical in a choose your own adventure type setting. But besides that, this would work really well for historical and for middle grade. And probably you might be able to consider this nonfiction because of the gamification of the book.
Yeah, my kids cannot, I cannot keep choose your own adventure books on the shelf. Like, they're always asking for them. And I do tend to have more nonfiction than I do fiction now that you mention it. So it's interesting that they took events like this, that are so important in our history and so many loss of lives.
Oh.
But yeah, because kids really connect with that. And I think it puts them in the story, right? Because like with the I Survived books by Lauren Tarshish, those are very much like you're in the action. And so in this way, kids get to be like, if I was ever in that situation, this is what I would do. So I feel like that sounds so cool. I haven't even heard of this one either. So I'm adding that to my fall order as well.
Yes, so much fun trying to survive, I guess. And again, I don't know if fun's the right word for these, but it's a fun reading experience. It was really fun to do with the kids. So those are our recommendations for the week. If you would like to share your recommendations or request a theme to be highlighted in a future show, reach out on social media at Books and Bingos or email us at booksandbingos@gmail.com. Thanks for listening, and join us again next week for a poetry theme. Happy reading!